Okay.
So we don't
Good morning,
know.
everyone. My name is Garrett Sheehan. We're going to get started in just a moment. We'll let everyone get into the webinar.
So we don't know when President Trump is going to sign off on it yet. We're still waiting on that. Hopefully he'll do it today or sometime over the weekend. We said the quiet before the storm, basically.
I know.
We'll get
I
started,
agree.
everyone, in just a moment. All right. Good morning. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. And we wanted to, again, hold one of these Q&A sessions. We realize so many questions out there, especially with the federal stimulus, just getting another boost, round of funding today. So we hope that the Paycheck Protection Program, and I should say we'll try really hard today to name out the acronyms. I know it just adds to the complications if you're not familiar with what we're talking about. But we have a panel of chamber folks, also one of our chamber folks, really, Joe Williams, as well with the Connecticut Small Business Development Center, Ann Benowitz with Greater New Haven and Quinnipiac Chambers, and Dee Pryor-Nesty, Executive Director of the Quinnipiac Chamber. So thanks all of our panelists. And you know what we really like to do on these sessions is answer the questions that you send us. So please feel free to go into the chat box, to go into the Q&A, type in the questions that you may have. It doesn't have to all be about the stimulus program. I know that that may be the number one topic, and if that's the case, that is fine. But you can really ask us about anything. If we don't have an answer, we'll look it up and try to get back to you. A couple of things, and then we'll get started. We are really starting to try to think about the reopening. I was very fortunate to be named to the Governor's Business Advisory Task Force for reopening Connecticut. And I'll just be honest, there's a lot of health experts on there. They're going to make sure that we do the safe and healthy thing. My goal is to be your advocate, the advocate for businesses, and trying to get the economy up and running as quickly as we can. Again, you know, we can propose it, and the health experts will let us know what is safe. So anything you have as far as the reopening, please feel free to share that with us as well. We know it's still a very difficult time. Many of you have not seen any money come from any of these stimulus programs yet, and you're still seeing your businesses in a complete collapse just because of the lack of customers and revenue. So with that, let me start. We'll start with Joe. And Joe, I know the program's got a boost of funding that should arrive hopefully later today, you know, within hours at some point. What can you tell us as we get started this morning?
Well, right now, this morning, the Congress has signed off on it, the Senate and the House. It's gone to President Trump's desk. He is now reviewing it. It's my understanding that he's going to sign it. We anticipate hopefully we'll do it today. We know he will do it shortly. The only changes really in the new PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, is more guidance to large corporations that received a large share of the first stimulus. I think this one will have language and guidelines to help more smaller businesses in particular. We don't know. I'm waiting on guidance right now. I just got some emails this morning from SBA, and this is what they're telling us. Be patient. Just know that at least it's gotten through Congress, and quite naturally, President Trump will sign off on it. There is more money on the emergency injury disaster zone fund, so that's good news too. So for those that have applied for the EIDL and you haven't heard anything from the SBA, I give you assurance, do not worry. As long as you have that loan number beginning with a 3, you are in the hopper. And to give you a little insight, if your number begins with 3-1, that means you're in week 1. If it's 3-2, that's week 2. 3-3 or 3-4, you know you're 3 or 4 weeks behind. That's an inside thing that you should understand. So if you're a 3-3, blah, 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 whatever number, you're 3 weeks away before someone in Fort Worth from SBA is going to contact you. That means there's 3 million people that have applied. That's what that number really actually represents. So just to be aware of that. So the first 1.5 million businesses have received their EIDL. So now they're working on those larger numbers So this.
All right, Joe, I got to stop you. So EIDL is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL, for anyone who has a question about that. Joe, there have been a lot of questions. We've seen people asking, I'm applying for PPP. There was a date before, as if you had applied for the EIDL earlier. You can apply for both, I guess, is the first thing. And how do those two interact?
Well, you can apply for both, and they interact, but you need to be very cautious when receiving the monies on the two. The PPP is a shorter program, a 2-year program that can turn into a grant, but you have to be careful on the guidance. I would encourage everyone to read the guidelines of the PPP, because initially it is a loan that the banks will decide when to contact SBA to convert it into a grant. The first 6 months, of course, SBA is paying your loan, and then after that, you will then start to pick it up. So I don't think within the first 6 months, they're gonna ask anyone for forgiveness. They're just not. All right, they're gonna make their money off the servicing of collecting the 1%. But once you do everything you have to do after that 90-day period, you brought your workers back, you pay them quarterly. The key thing that you need to understand is you cannot double dip. So most people are applying for the EIDL. They want to cover payroll, other expenses, insurances, paying down mortgages or interest and leases and things of that nature. Well, you can't take that same items and use PPP to pay for the same thing. And the only way you can ever do that is if I apply for the EIDL and the PPP takes roughly less than 2 for you to fully from start to finish to receive the money. You bring your employees back, you use that money exclusively for payroll, minimally 75% of that for payroll. Now, time has elapsed. Your EIDL comes in, say 3 weeks later. Well, naturally, you're not going to use the EIDL money for payroll. You should use it for other types of qualifying expenses of the business. Because if you don't, what the government's going to do and the bank, they're going to get disqualified. And that's what my big worry about, that people must understand the PPP guidelines, that you cannot double dip with the two programs. They must be separate. They must pay for separate items, meaning you cannot take money from the PPP and the EIDL and pay, this week I'm paying payroll with PPP, next week I'm paying payroll with EIDL. It does not work that way. That's a violation. And you have to be careful of that. So please review the guidelines. You can find them on SBA.gov. You can find them on our website at ctspdc.com. There are tutorials. Even with the application for those who have not yet applied, you should contact your bank directly for the PPP. Even if you've already applied and you're in queue, you want to make sure that they're going to include you on the new stimulus and upload your documentation to E-Tran. So a lot of people that missed out on the first stimulus, the bank had not yet uploaded their application to E-Tran. And so until you upload to E-Tran, which is the SBA internal website that signs your loan number, you're not in the system.
Hey, Joe, some questions too I've seen this week about the $10,000 advance grant on the economic injury disaster loan. It seemed at first that was a guarantee everyone was going to get $10,000. Is that the case, or are some people getting less than that $10,000 based on employees and size of their business?
It's based on employees, Garrett. It was kind of, it's up to $10,000. It is an advance of your loan that is basically forgivable. But for every employee that you have, which is really up to 10, that's how you fully qualify for the $10,000. So if you have one employee, the government's going to give you $1,000. In New Haven County, where we are, some of my clients have already received that advance, and it was really based on the number of employees they had. So,
okay, that's good to know. I think that was something that was kind of not that clear early on. I did see someone on the Q&A who said they did receive their money just yesterday or today. So that's good news. I think we're starting to have more stories of people where the dollars are starting to flow into their bank accounts. I'll turn to Ann now, and then Dee. What are you guys, some of the questions you guys have heard this week from businesses overall?
I think mostly it's about, sort of the new stimulus, what's going to be, are we going to get any money out of it? That's the biggest question we're seeing. What banks are really the best for, processing these loans? We've seen stories that, there was just a very small percentage that had been approved from some of the banks, which we know, we understand. But like Joe said, call your bank, get in touch with them, make sure you reapply if you have to, but make sure that you get that TRAN number, that E-TRAN number, because that's the key to making sure you get your money. They are prioritizing smaller businesses this time. This round is much different than the original round. It is a loan that was, quite frankly, rushed through Congress, and there were things that were inescapably, loopholes that other companies went into, and it wasn't illegal and it wasn't necessarily wrong. It just was part of the law. But now that we've stepped back for a few weeks and we understand it a little bit more fully, there have been adjustments that the SBA has, put out, and that's why the new guideline. We've put that up on our website. So not only are there new guidelines for the lenders that are available and the types of businesses that they're going to lend to this time, in other words, really focusing on the smaller mom and pop kinds of businesses, but the agricultural sector has been included, which is a nice addition because there were some businesses in our region who were affected by COVID-19 quarantine, and they have now available funds for them. So I think that those are the big things that are changed this time around.
You're on mute, Garrett.
D.
Okay. We had questions about that number, and if you didn't get that number, what to do. And I've just been telling them, just keep going back to your bank and calling and contacting them. But the other question is, after this wave is depleted, because so many people were so disappointed around the first round, is this going to be replenished again, or will this be it?
Yeah, I think, there's not a clear answer, but definitely I know Congress is already starting to work on phase 4. It would be my hope that, if this round of funding is depleted, that it will again be replenished, hopefully more quickly. I think it took about, over 7 days from when the fund went down to 0 to now where we're starting to get dollars back in. That just creates added extra panic for businesses. This definitely should not be a thing of winners and losers who got through on the PPP. I think Ann was talking about it, but definitely it's great for a lot of our very small businesses and our minority-owned businesses that a certain portion have been earmarked for community-based financial organizations. So that's just going to give more access where a more sophisticated business who had a really strong banking relationship was able to make that application at 12:01 a.m. on Friday a couple of weeks ago. And, a small business is going to take a little bit more time getting their information together. And so I think this creates more of an avenue. But still, I would expect that these funds will be exhausted fairly quickly here.
Yes.
We've been out over a week of people getting their applications ready. So there is a big backlog of applications sitting out there that as soon as those get processed, you're going to see billions of dollars just literally fly out the door, which is good. That's what we want to see. But also we want to make sure that other businesses, that all businesses can take advantage of this. One thing I've seen, and Joe and anyone else who wants to jump in, is that many businesses rushed to the door. They got in on PPP right away, and now they're kind of understanding the full terms of those grants, and that if they want to get the loan converted to a grant, they need to get all their employees back. Many of them were not ready to do that at the get-go and are kind of having to work through that. Many of them don't have a lot of employees. That's one key thing that people should be aware of, is that if you are more of a, let's take a business that owns residential property where you don't have that many employees, but you have a lot of other expenses. You have to have that 75% ratio dedicated to payroll to get other expenses covered in that other 25%. So if you're the type of business that does not have a lot of payroll, that's going to create somewhat of an issue for you as far as converting to a grant. So it's, it's still a very low interest loan, but something that people should be aware of. Joe?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Garrett. That's why, I mean, as many people ran out to the PPP, it may not be the best one. I mean, if I'm a sole proprietor, I'm the owner. PPP is not for you. Let me be honest with you. You're a residential landlord, PPP is not for you. Any business that you only have one or two people, it's based on your payroll. It is a paycheck protection plan. That's what PPP really is. And the stipulation for that grant, as you alluded to, Garrett, is the 75% threshold that must be spent exclusively on payroll and payroll expenses. And it does not include, this is very important, payroll taxes. So the payroll taxes, federal taxes that you pay for payroll cannot be included in your PPP. It is not calculated in your calculation. It is only those payroll expenses of the payroll and like sick leave, vacation time, and things of that nature that you include and multiply by 2.5% times your payroll. That's how they calculate it. And that's a little bit confusing for many people. There is guidance, once again, of that calculation. It is on the first half of the application of SBA. That is the question you must answer. And that makes your determination. And many people were kind of surprised when they say, oh, I only qualify maybe for $7,000, $5,000. Well, it's based on your payroll of your employees. If you're solo, it's better that you apply to the EIDL, look at the opportunity there. One, what's going to help you with that, and the reason I encourage the EIDL more so sometimes than the PPP, if you have one or two employees, I would rather apply for the portion of the EIDL and go after my loan, especially if my revenue numbers are very high, but my employment payroll is very, very low. You're going to do better just applying for the EIDL and let other individuals that may have 15 employees apply and take up some of those dollars. So what we had in the first portion of the PPP, we had bigger corporations that were franchised around the country. So they qualify simply because, together as a conglomerate, they may have more than 500 employees, but a local restaurant chain, they may only have 20 or 30 people. And so that's how they were able to get millions of dollars, because they aggregated it at the bank level to say, individually, we're giving you this, like the Ruth's Chris thing, they got $20 million. That was, they took all the franchises and pulled them together and said, it's a total aggregate for that corporation, we're giving you this, and it will be dispersed. And so in a way, most Americans look at it and say, oh, that's unfair. But if you look at it, each of these local restaurants, even though they're franchises, they're in our local community. They are employing individuals. So imagine if they really didn't get the stimulus. What's in the new guidance, though, pertaining to that, is if they can qualify for a loan at a regular bank, they're not to apply for PPP. They will get denied. And so it's more focused on small business at this time, which is good for us. Going to what you said, more of the community lending banks, some of the smaller banks, the micro lenders, they're actually receiving dollars that they will distribute. It wasn't like that in the first one. The big banks, the Bank of America, the Chases, the Citibanks, Wells Fargo, those type of banks really received a bulk of it. And they were taking money in tranches, billions of dollars at one time. That's why the money was so quick, because it was done in the way it was done. And I think in this time, it's just different. And we should be mindful of how we should approach it.
A couple questions here. Just trying to fill up, and that's good. First one, some people concerned that their employees won't come back when they have PPP. I've heard a lot of concern about this. I don't know if I've heard so much of actual situations where the employees said, I'm not coming back. There's a few things that work here. Obviously, we have unemployment, and there's some boosted benefits, the additional $600 a week, which is significant, and for many of your employees, maybe more than what they're making right now. only thing I can add on that, and you know, people are going to do what they're going to do, but there are requirements in unemployment that if you are, you know, that you need to be actively looking for a job, and if you have a job available, if you don't take that, then you are in jeopardy of losing those benefits. The system is crazy right now, so I'm not saying that there's going to be a lot of policing going on. You know, I think the other thing that, you know, maybe if you're having trouble with an employee who says, you know, they'd rather take benefits, you know, we're entering into a really uncharted territory for the long term here, and I don't know if it's smart to turn down a job offer, because jobs may not be still available later down the line. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen. So I think thumbing your nose, you know, definitely unemployment benefits are nice right now, but those do run out at some point. So thumbing your nose at a legitimate job opportunity is a gamble.
And
anyone else want to add to that?
Even Garrett, remember, July 31st is going to come quick.
Yes, I was just going to say that, Joe.
It's going to run out. So you're going to be back to zero. So you have to be mindful of that. I think that what employers and employees should do is work together and really figure out how, as a business in total, should come together to reopen. Remember, the state of Connecticut, we are really technically closed until May 20th. And we're going to gradually open it up. It's not going to be like other states would say, okay, everybody can go back to work, business as usual. It's not like that. It's going to be, you know, like Garrett alluded to, health is going to be the biggest concern of our government. And we're going to gradually, maybe 25, then to 50, and then to maybe the full back to normal is what I speculate. I mean, I've been told, I'm a state employee, that I'm not going back to work until June. I knew this in March, that I wasn't going back to June. So if I know I'm over and I work for the state of Connecticut, and we're looking at this going to be a phased approach, we're going to bring back essential employees first, and then our essential businesses first, and then gradually look into it. Unfortunately, I can tell those who have people businesses, let's say spas, gyms, barbershops, salon, you'll probably be one of the last businesses that are going to be allowed to come back. And this is nationwide, just because of the concern that we do not yet have enough testing. The key is we must test everyone to be sure that the spread or doesn't really come back in a very big way. And that's a very big concern. This is what I'm seeing on the news, what all the governors are really talking about, from California to New York. This is the major concern of, do we open too soon and the pandemic comes roaring back in midsummer? And we already know that it may be something that we have to deal and contend with in the fall because of influenza. And now you're going to be dealing with two viruses, influenza, the flu, which we encourage everyone to get the flu shot, and COVID. And so testing is going to be a big deal for us.
So I just want to jump in on the idea of people not returning. I agree with Joe that, you know, at some point the benefits will run out, number one. But the other thing is that, you know, because there are a couple of questions on here that sort of, you know, address this issue of, you know, do the employees want to come back to work because they're afraid of, you know, being exposed to the virus? Well, you've got to work with your employees, you know, so whether or not they're, you know, returning because of the sickness or they're on unemployment, you're going to have to work with your employees and try to figure out a balance. There's lots of things you can do as far as shared work. There's another question in there about that, and we'll get to that. But I think that there are conversations you need to have, and you've got to, as an employer, and Joe, you can chime in on this, but you know, you've got to make a decision whether or not that employee is essential to be at the location and whether or not they can be at home. And you know, whether if they're nervous about coming back because of the illness, then there are things you've got to work out with them.
Absolutely, I agree with you that, and some recommendations that we've been dealing with. It's going back to full employment and bringing them back. Remember, we have over 25 million Americans on unemployment. These are greater numbers than the Great Depression. And so how do you stem that tide to get our economy back on track? So whether the person says, listen, I'm an employee, I'm maybe not an essential, but I'm essential to the business because maybe I'm a cashier and I'm the front line person and I deal with the public or something of that nature. And, you know, I'm used to wearing this mask, but am I used to wearing it 8-hour shifts type of thing?
Right.
Come back to work, you know, everyone hasn't tested. So these are real concerns of individuals. And we understand that, you know, I know certain businesses that are paying their employees, and the employees are home. Remember, it's to bring your employees back on the payroll and less on unemployment. That's what PPP is really for.
That's
But you have
right.
to find it and understand, knowing that we're in a state that is closed right now, many people are not visiting, you know, we're on restrictions. We really got to look at the restrictions and how they're being lifted, looking at the concerns of our employees and the overall health of our businesses. And what is the timing? This is why, if I look at the situation, you know, there's certain people that applied for the IO 2 or 3 weeks ago, haven't heard anything. And now they try to apply for the PPP, but now weren't put into the first tranche. Now, new stimulus any day now is going to be signed. You're going to be in the queue. Those who were in the queue that applied and they weren't respond, you're going to probably see half of that money go in 3 or 4 days. It's going to be shot. But there's a lot of thousands of businesses in the queue. This is what we encourage small businesses right now to reach out to your bank. Do not wait till President Trump signs this bill. You want to let your bank know that you are ready. And when they're going to open up the portals again. And I would encourage one other thing too, Ann and Gary, there's alternative lenders, Cabbage,
Yes.
PayTech, QuickBooks, PayPal, NewTek. These are all alternative lenders that have been approved that will probably move your application through the PPP a lot faster with a lot less restrictions on it, and they will definitely probably upload it. This is where we're seeing the best success are the internet type of lenders that have been approved to actually participate in PPP.
Okay, so let's all good points. And I should say too, you know, a lot of our problems right now with the economy. I mean, we do have a lot of businesses that are open. You know, our state's closing rules are fairly flexible. There are definitely some that are completely restricted, have to be closed. But you know, we really need people to get some economic confidence back so that they can, even if it's through online, start having more activity. And that's what's going to start getting the economy going. A few of these quick questions here. What are you hearing from nonprofits about their experience with securing funds? Nonprofits, 501c3s are eligible for these funds. Anyone hearing anything different on the nonprofits? Any special, unique troubles they're having?
Just applying.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's definitely the same challenges that everyone faces. Question for clarification on PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. You know, first, one thing I should clarify is that the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, that's directly with the SBA, and the Paycheck Protection Program is through the bank. I know some people have asked the bank about their injury disaster loan and you're not getting a response from them. Well, that's because they are not part of that process. But just using it as working capital, you know, here's a question, Joe, I'll throw out to you. You know, if someone used their paycheck protection to cover rent costs during the 8-week period, are they then prohibited from using the disaster loan at any point to pay for future rent costs? I think the answer is no, but I'll let you.
No, just no. If you did that, you'd be disqualified for the PPP turning into a grant because you've used more than 75% of it for non-payroll uses, which is a stipulation in the guidelines. So be careful with that.
Well, you'd have to have enough payroll to have 75%, and then your rent count for 25%. Right. Let's see. PPP was funded on April 14th. Our 8-week period runs out June 8th. What then? You know, this is a question we get a lot, especially, and it really does relate to, well, when's my state reopening? When are things going to go back to normal? And, you know, not a lot of answers that we have there, other than to say, I think that, you know, Congress is going to have to look at this because our understanding and perception of the situation for all of us continues to change. And when we probably first started staying home, we were looking at 4 weeks. Maybe that was the consensus of how long we'd be home. I think we're all looking at a much, at least in our minds, expecting something that's longer. We're already past that 4-week mark, and then not sure what new normal looks like. So that does, leave a big open question of what you do when that loan grant runs out. And it may be that you have to lay off workers again. We don't want that yin and yang going back and forth. But that is the reality of it, that might be the situation. So I think we're just trying to get through what we can get through now, and then maybe there'll be some other program on the horizon at that point. Do essential businesses that are currently operating qualify for PPP? And the answer to that is yes. It's that your level of operation is not factored in to the program at all. Let's see. Dee, anything you want to add? Anything you're picking up here?
Yeah, I have some questions about, someone had asked that, like Joe said, people might lose their homes if this continues, being out of work for a significant amount of time, and they might have to sell their home, but we're hearing it's almost impossible to sell your home because the banks are so tied up with the PPP program that they're not even processing mortgages. Has anybody heard anything along those lines?
I have heard that the banks are processing the mortgages, because, at least the ones for now, because there have been commitments. So those mortgages, those commitments that had already been made, are being processed. Mm-hmm. I don't know about the future, and I don't know, maybe Joe has a better insight.
Well, this came up yesterday in our other, when we were talking about contracts. And, there is just a delay right now because the banks are so consumed with the Paycheck Protection Program, and they've pulled people from all departments. So processing a mortgage right now. Also there was a huge rush of people trying to refinance as well. So factor that in as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all you. One of my properties. And it's been delayed. But it's because of PPP. You're right. There was an onslaught. People are working overtime, from home. A lot of banks are closed, necessarily telecommuting. So they're having to do the new normal of trying to work outside of their office to get things done. So it's a lot that is new to us. We're getting used to it. It's going to take a little bit of time. I definitely see that from a banking standpoint, probably the next week to 2 weeks, it's going to be really, really busy for the banks. There will be just probably concentrating on the PPP, getting that paperwork in, making sure those funds are all going out. That's understandable right now. And, for me as an American citizen, I kind of want to take a back seat and say, listen, for those with greatest need, let them get the aid. I'm still getting a check. So, but what about the person that's been out, the business has been forced to close for over a month? They have no money coming in. Their unemployment hasn't come in for their employees, but they still have the bills. They didn't know to delay certain bills such as mortgages, credit cards, and things. They may not have known about Governor Lamont putting that 90-day stay for landlords and to banks for people to not have to pay. But you have to request all this help and aid that's out there. So it's not like it's not there. It's just taking a little bit more time for us to really understand all this information, because every day more information comes out of what the stimulus really means and how we should be reacting as business owners.
Let me rapid fire a couple of these, and then another question for Joe here. Someone asking, they don't have enough payroll to meet the 75% and take care of their other expenses, so asking if they can give themselves a raise. You can't do that because it's based off of the base was set up. Is it February, Joe, that they marked what your payroll was?
It was February this year, but it goes to last year's.
That's right.
12 weeks from last year. So you can't go and say, oh, I'm making whatever X amount of thousands more dollars. Doesn't work that way at all. So be mindful of that. Once again, the PPP, everyone wants to run to the PPP because of the grant portion of it, but it may not work for your business. And particularly from the things we just talked about, you have that 8 weeks window that you must pay these employees, and our state is still shut down. This is why I wasn't even necessarily responding and telling all my clients to rush to the PPP, especially if your expenses outweigh with your payroll because you're a 1 or 2 person organization. And that is not a good fit for you. When you have really other bills that are more of your concern, keeping the lights on, paying the insurances of it, and things of that nature, paying the rent or the mortgage on your location, the EIDL program is the best program for you. And then some of that up to $10,000 grant is going to cover for that. If I have 2 employees, you get $2,000. I mean, that's what it is. If you have 4, you get $4,000. And so you have to gauge strategically, looking at your cash flow right now. Even the decisions of the PPP, decisions of the IDL, it is really made on cash flow. They're taking your revenue to consideration before and during COVID, 90 days after you reopen, is how the determination is actually made on your EIDL. So what most people you're going to see, if you haven't received your document yet, the first question they ask you is, tell us your revenue, verify your revenue. The next question is cost of goods sold. They want to know your expenses. And if you are a landlord, with that, the loss of your rent. You must sign that document under pains of perjury. That goes back to your loan officer. They then make you an offer. That is how EIDL works. And it's very quickly after that is just the waiting period for someone in SBA to finally contact you. So just be patient.
Another question here that we can kind of put out quickly. Can you do the shared work program and still get the grant with PPP? And I'd say the answer is yes. Just realize though that the grant goes down, the percentage of the loan that becomes the grant goes down based off of what your employment is. So if your FTEs are lower than they were before, then you're gonna not get that full grant.
Correct. That's correct.
Joe, why don't you talk a little bit about the documentation that people need to be able to get PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program?
One, if you haven't gone to the portal of the SBA, you should download the actual application, the 2-page application, and begin filling out the formula. The only thing that the bank is really doing is just verifying the information that you submit on those 2 pages. With that, they may ask you for some financial information. You should have a P&L, your profit and loss statement available. You should know a little bit about your cash flow and the expenses, because this is a loan. The bank is qualifying. It's just less stringent than taking a normal 7A or 504 loan, which is the SBA guarantee programs. So, but it is still a loan that can be converted later to a grant. So much like you're going to apply, all the things are in consideration. And you got to be mindful of that. So I would recommend right now that you download the 2-page forms, documents, go to one of the webinars, either to the chamber, or my website, or SBA, to figure out the formula, because it's 2.5 times, but it's just not what you give a person in a paycheck that qualifies under that number. So your grant or the PPP can be a little bit higher if you know the qualifying other avenues that you can put into it, which is important. And so the financial documents and the other thing is just verifying who you are, ownership, things of that nature, just the typical rigmarole. Each bank, though, has its own internal documents other than the SBA forms that are required. That's why you must contact your particular institution, because they may want you to sign something else, or they may want to do a different calculator on their particular forms. So the thing that is actually universal is the SBA forms for the PPP. That's universal. Everyone in every bank in this country is using the same SBA form. After that, it is internal of the banking institution. Right. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, I've gotten that question too. And I agree with you, Joe, that, I've recommended people talk to their banks, because who knows what the bank is going to ask of you. Some just say, we want your P&L, or we want, a statement of benefits from your payroll provider, plus the payroll for that period of time. So it is wise to talk with the bank.
Absolutely.
Question here about employees who want to stay home because they're over 60, higher risk, not feeling comfortable. you know, right now there is not really a great fix for this. There may be some maneuverability with the increased paid sick leave program. I think you might probably need like a doctor's note or something like that. Don't have a lot of clarity around that. You know, I think this is something that's going to have to get addressed more in any type of reopening plan. You're seeing things where, you know, people who are more vulnerable really would have to, you know, have some more self-imposed restrictions on themselves just for their own safety. Anyone else can jump in here, but I haven't seen a lot of clarity around how to do this, but I think that's definitely something that's going to be addressed more.
I also think, Garrett, that raises the issue of what do you do if you get PPP money and some of your employees don't want to come back to work, because as we all know, the PPP has to be utilized to rehire your employees. And if you don't come up to that employment level, it doesn't have to be that person, but if you don't come up to that employment level during that 8-week period of time before June 30th, you may disqualify yourself for those funds. So you've got to be very careful. And, you know, somebody asked me, can I put that into an escrow account and not use it? The answer is, well, you can do that if you want to keep it alone. But that's the caveat, is that it will not be converted into a grant if it's not utilized for its purpose.
Well, that does raise one good point. Is that, you know, you can, if you take the Paycheck Protection Program, you can pay employees to sit at home. There's no requirement that they have to come in, and you can still, as you were just pointing out, Ann, still reach those qualification levels to make it be a grant. And if you're comfortable with them not coming into the office, you know, especially because you're getting that stimulus money, there's nothing saying that you can't pay someone and they're staying at their house and not doing work. That's just the way it's set up, and it is meant to bring things into almost an economic pause and get people off the unemployment rolls. So. We've got a few more questions. Joe, maybe talk a little bit about anyone who's a 1099 worker. Also, we have had questions about people who are self-employed, if they would qualify for the programs. I know there's been some questions about whether a self-employed person can qualify for unemployment. That kind of breaks more along if you've been paying yourself as an employee with a W-2 and paying into the unemployment insurance program. More fine details around that, but Joe, in general, anyone who was a 1099 employee was able to start applying for paycheck protection last week.
Yeah, we got some good new guidance as of this morning. The SBA sent me an email to addressing that. For those that are self-employed or 1099 that file with K1.
K1.
If you on line number 14, which says your self-employment payroll, that you will qualify. It just got that guidance today. So if you do fill out a K1 and put in self-employment in line number 14, they're going to take that amount for your self-employment as your salary. If you don't do that, it will disqualify you, because most people who are self-employed, they just say, I'm just taking a contribution at the end. That doesn't qualify you. But if you have a K1 in line 14 and you have dollar amount in there, you are qualified to apply for the programs. You sole proprietors and 1099s, the EIDL is open for you. It's been open for you. Even the PPP, just the guideline as of this morning, though, they are looking at the K1. But if you just put on your taxes that you say you took a distribution at the end of the year, that disqualifies you. You must have a dollar amount in your K1 on line number 14. Okay.
Thanks for that clarification. Dee, any other questions you're seeing out there?
Yeah, we have a lot of farmers in Wallingford and North Haven, and before we started the webinar, you had mentioned that agriculture was now included in the funding, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay, great.
So they can apply, and they should apply very quickly. And like Joe said, I would highly recommend as well, that they get out that application today, even though it's not, those funds are not released, get all of the paperwork and documentation together in advance of that funding being released, because as soon as it's released, they need to get that to their bank.
We've been working hard on getting that message out. Any word on this? One of the questions we had was time frame from application to when they will receive funds. We've been hearing a lot of good stories too. People they are coming in, so that's good. But is there any time frame that you can kind of?
The PPP takes less than 2 weeks. The EIDL is taking a full month from start to finish. So. Okay. So right now, and I'll encourage those who applied 2 or 3 weeks ago and you haven't heard anyone back, once you get contacted in a week and a half after the SBA underwriter reaches out to you, Treasury is going to give you a check. It's very, very quick. I mean, literally you have a 15-minute conversation, they verify a form, you sign it, you send it back, you email it, they send you another form. They then, in a matter of 3 days, they send you all your closing documents in email. You fill them out, you send them back through email, and then they send you your package. And then in the package, you receive a green envelope. You'll fill it out, sign it. You must go at that time to the Secretary of State's office and file the lien yourself. That is something that is very important that people don't understand, that they must file the lien, and you must download the lien, the UCC filing, and with the package, and you send it. 3 to 5 days after, you will then get a call from the attorney. The attorney will review your application documents, and the next day they put the money in your account. It's that quick.
And we do have someone on here who said that their loan was approved for Paycheck Protection on April 8th, and the funds arrived in their account on April 23rd. So Joe said 2 weeks. That's right in line with those 2 weeks. And really, I do think as well, I heard a lot from our bankers that, you know, they themselves were getting a smoother process. You know, this was a huge undertaking, and definitely as time went through, they were able to streamline their process. So you might start even seeing faster times for some of those turnarounds. Let's see, some folks who already received their PPP, that's true. And there's a special fund dedicated towards minority-owned businesses through HEDCO. So some of those funds have been pushed out as well. And one question about the S Corp here. Schedule K1, I thought, is for S Corp shareholders. You need one for a C Corp with no shareholders. Joe, you seen that question?
Yeah, I just saw that because I was trying to read it. Yeah, the K1 applies to certain type of corporations. It's just guidance. So many questions came up to the SBA. They just put up the edict out this morning to answer and address just K1, and that was the answer. And I'll send that over to you guys just so you can have the language too for you. So they were just addressing those corporations who must file K1s. Is line number 14 that qualifies you as self-employment wages.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else you're hearing out there?
Where can we get masks? And I know that you said that you had some.
You read my mind. I was just gonna ask if we could talk about that. So I have a few sources that we've put out on our social media. So go to our social media pages and you'll get mask sources. We're gonna be posting much more information on our website and on our social media. So feel free, we will have continuing sources for masks and other PPE products that people need. So just keep touching base with us. We'll get you your information.
Yeah, it is a minefield out there. I know we have some chamber members and some local folks who now are selling those masks. I had placed an order on Amazon a couple of weeks ago, and you know, it's like stopped in transit at the same location for a while. So I don't think it's actually coming through. So, you know, some of the local vendors that we have probably are the best bet, but obviously a much different need than we had seen before.
I know a lot of people are making their masks, and I think that's really tremendous. You know, there are sources around town in Wallingford and in North Haven as well as New Haven. And so we will have other sources. I just want to assure people that they should just keep checking back with us on our social media and on our COVID page or our other resource page. So we'll continue for you.
You know, one thing I do want to just mention, you know, we're doing our best to give you all advice on these programs. With all of these, though, your particular situations are really going to dictate, especially the facts around your business. So, you know, we hope you get some guidance from these sessions, but in all situations, I would say, you know, definitely talk with the banker or any other financial expert you have, you know, because we don't know all the particular facts of your individual situation and how it'll apply. So always before you sign off on these loans, you want to make sure you have complete understanding of what you're getting into. I'm not seeing any other questions. Again, you know, we're at the chambers. We're always open for questions. We try to make sure we get those to the appropriate source. I'll just let each of our panelists kind of close out here, and then we'll wrap things up. So, Anne, let me start with you.
Sure. You know, I think we're bringing up all the good points that most people have asked us about. There are some particular situations that are specific to individual companies, but I would encourage you to keep touching base with us, because sometimes I have found, and I'm sure the rest of us have, that some of the questions that you're asking aren't as particular as you might think. You know, it is particular to you, sure, and we love that we can answer you or get an answer for you, but they will be particular to other people as well. So please touch base with us and let us know. And we will do our very best to guide you in the best way that we possibly can, or guide you to the best solution for you. So please continue to touch base with us. And I think that we've in the past put our emails out, and we're happy to do that again if anybody needs it. But you know, we're available on our website too. Mm-hmm. And Joe is available through the Connecticut DCD and SBDC site. So you could put that out, Joe.
Dee?
You know, just the same. We're here to help. The websites are similar in information. We share all our information. Same with the Facebook page. Just jump on, and I'm feeling a little bit encouraged because we got a lot more questions and confusion last week than we have this week. So I'm hoping that we're getting into more of a rhythm of people applying and hopefully being successful in getting that funding. But like everybody's saying, don't hesitate. If you have not applied, do it now.
And Joe, I'm going to have you answer a question and wrap up. So, and I think this is a good question because there is a lot of confusion on the timeline. So what is we've talked about the 8-week period. We've also talked about by the end of June. What is the timeline for hiring back employees to make sure that you get that full grant funding? When does the kind of trigger period start there?
The trigger period actually, as soon as the bank approves you and gives you your disbursement, your clock starts in the PPP. That's exactly what the guidelines stipulate. It's when the time of disbursement, the clock begins. So just be mindful of that. So, and I tell people this all the time. I say, you know something, as long as my application is with the bank and the bank is really working with me, I'm having a dialogue, and I know their monies are still there, and number, and I'm good. And that's what anyone on this phone call should understand. It is that E-Tran number. That is your actual loan number that the government has recognized that the amount that the bank is about to issue you, they've accepted. All right. And until you get that, you should constantly ask the bank, what is my E-Tran number? What is my E-Tran number? Because that's what a lot of people were left out, thinking the bank was processing their loan information, but they had not uploaded the application to get that E-Tran. So be mindful of that. Also, I just wanted to let those on the call know that to reach me directly, simply go to ctsbdc.com, register ask for an advisor to be assigned to you. Because one thing I'm finding right now, for those who receive the money, or those who are looking at, we have strategy sessions right now. It is what is the new normal. That is what I'm really advising now is those who receive money, Joe, we're still closing. How should I really govern my business? You know, what's next for me? And so I'm working through with the different clients, those who still are applying, but those who have received dollars, you know, what do we do? You know, interim, hey, I just got my PPP, Joe. How should I bring my employees back? Do I want to bring them all at one time? Should I bring them on gradually? How do I reopen my business still under some of the semi-restrictions of the state? So we want to talk about that. So I encourage everyone to just go to my website, ctspdc.com, Garrett D. And I appreciate you guys. Love you guys to death. You know, definitely stay safe. And we'll get through this. You know, we'll definitely get through this.
Yeah.
Joe, one last quick one. Is the paycheck protection money, is that taxable income?
Good question. Good question. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that because I've heard two different stories on that. I'm gonna pose that because no, it's not. The PPP is not taxable, and I'll tell you why. The PPP is a loan that the government will then forgive as a grant. It is not taxable. Okay, so just so you know, it's not taxable to the business. The wages that you pay your employees, they're taxable. The amount you receive for a business is not. Okay.
Gotcha.
But you still have to pay your payroll taxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'm sure we'll talk again next week. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Joe.